y'all, welcome back to my channel. So today's video we are in the kitchen and I'm going to be showing you how to make buttermilk biscuits. This is one of my most favorite things to make in the kitchen for my family. There's absolutely nothing that compares to fresh homemade buttermilk biscuits. Ever since I learned how to make these, I refuse to buy those biscuits in a can at the grocery store because it's just so much better to make your own, and it is easy if you follow these steps, and you can tweak the recipe if you wish, but this is my personal favorite recipe and my family's. I make them all the time. I've got it down to where it's pretty much only takes 20 minutes to make them, and I make them for breakfast and I also make them for dinner, and they're delicious. So if you're interested in learning how to make buttermilk biscuits, just keep watching. So the things that we will need to make our biscuits are going to be our flour. So I have just some all-purpose flour here. Being in quarantine, it's been pretty hard to find flour. Typically I would use a self-rising flour because it already has your leavening agents in it. But because this was all that I could find as far as flour goes, this is just a typical all-purpose flour. You know, I like to dump it into a big container instead of keeping it in the bag, but I just have the bag to show you. So this is my APF little tub here with my flour. So we need that, and then right over here we have our sugar. We just add a tad bit of sugar, but I have it here. And then we have our baking powder, our salt. I'm running out of salt, as you can see, but I'm going to use a little bit of salt, some buttermilk. This has also been really hard to come by during quarantine, so they only have these little containers, and it is the low fat. I do prefer the full fat, but this is perfectly fine if you want to use low fat. A measuring cup. I don't have specific biscuit cutters, so I just use a glass. You can use whatever kind of cup or cutter that you would like to use to shape your biscuits, but I like them to be kind of little, like 2-bite size or what have you, and this is usually the cup that I use to cut the biscuits. And you'll also need a cheese grater. So this is for the butter, which we'll need the butter too. So you need half a cup of butter, which is 1 stick. And I've had it in the freezer because you want your ingredients to be really cold. And I just pulled this out of the freezer. I had it sitting in the freezer for about 20 minutes to get it super cold because you want your wet ingredients to be really cold. So the butter is still in the freezer. I'm gonna pull it out right when I'm ready to start grating it. So I don't have a pie cutter. I don't like using a fork or a knife to cut my butter into my flour. I prefer using the large serrations on this cheese grater because it just helps that butter to come out nice and small when I mix in my flour, and it's quick, and I get a workout while doing it too. So, all right, so let's get started. So I did forget to mention we need a measuring cup for our flour. Basic recipe. So we're gonna need 2 cups of flour. Pretty simple. Okay, set that to the side. And then we'll start putting in our leavening agent, which is our baking powder. So you need 5 teaspoons of baking powder. Sounds like a lot, but it's totally fine. Yeah. So 5 teaspoons of baking powder. Okay. Then we're gonna do our salt, which is half a teaspoon. I mean, you could totally eyeball it, but okay, so that's all the salt. And a little bit of sugar. So this recipe that I originally looked up calls for 2 tablespoons, but I like to cut that in half because I don't like my biscuits to be super sweet. I like them to be tangy from the buttermilk and kind of salty and savory, so I prefer a more savory biscuit, so I just use 1 tablespoon of sugar. Okie dokie. And I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention, we also need a whisk. You can sift your ingredients too. Sometimes I'll put a sifter on top of my bowl and then dump everything and just sift it to make sure it's evenly distributed and then you get all of your baking powder in there and your salt and your okay, so you're gonna whisk all this together. Okay, so we have all of our dry ingredients ready to go. So now comes the butter part. So we're going to pull the butter out of the freezer. Okay, nice and cold. And you want to work quickly at this point because, again, you want your ingredients to stay cold as much as possible. And I'm using salted butter. That's just what I have on hand right now, but you can use unsalted. So again, we're using the large grates, and you're just going to start grating your butter. So, grating it directly into the bowl. So again, with the grating, this is taking the place of a pastry cutter, your fork, or a knife, or even chopping the butter into little pieces. This is going to create that pea-sized little granules that we're looking for whenever we mix the butter into the flour. And I really like this technique. It does require quite a bit of energy. My arms are usually burning, and they kind of are right now, but we're almost done. And the more easier it gets done, because if it starts to melt or you have it kind of just straight out of the fridge, it gets really slippery and messy. So I'm being very careful. I'm just pushing the butter up against it. Almost done. Almost done. I'm being very careful not to hit my fingers. So that's it. So those last little bits you can just kind of toss in there. And I kind of scrape the inside just to get any butter that's stuck to the inside. And that's pretty much all your butter in there. Okay. So right now, you could use a fork to stir this in. You could use a wooden spoon. I do this all with my hands. It's just less things that I have to wash. So, you're gonna start mixing in your butter into your flour. So you can see here, all those butter pieces are getting coated with that flour. And you can see what I'm talking about when I'm saying like those little pea-sized granules in your flour. You want those little pockets of butter in your biscuit. Make sure you get down to the bottom. Okay, hands are nice and messy. And yes, I did wash my hands before we got started. That's very important. Okay, so now we're gonna take our buttermilk. We need 1 cup of buttermilk. It's nice and cold. Okay. So while I'm doing this, I'm pouring and I'm stirring with my hand at the same time. So what I like to do is I like to create a little well in my bowl, and then I'm gonna pour my buttermilk in there and just start kind of mixing it around. Pour it all in there. Okay, and then you're gonna stir it around. I'm going from the bottom up, just kind of incorporating it all. And your dough is gonna start to have like a shaggy look to it. It should not be super wet. It'll look just kind of like it's falling apart, but then when we dump it out onto the counter, we're gonna form a nice dough ball. All right, this looks perfect. Okay. So I've already pre-floured my surface, so I just kind of shook some flour out here because you don't want it to stick to your surface. So I'm gonna go ahead and just dump this out. Okay. All right, so you're gonna start to form your dough. Try to get all the dough off of your fingers as best as you can. And I do like to have a little bit of flour next to me as I'm going along, or I'll just kind of rub my hands on the flour on the counter, because this can get sticky and you don't want it to stick, basically. Okay, so now comes the kneading part of it. So with biscuits, you want to create layers, but you don't want to overwork it. So don't overthink this part, just go with the flow. I like to say, if you're like really nervous about it, 15 times of you kneading the dough, if you count to 15, you're pretty much okay. Okay, so you have your dough, and you're gonna start to fold it and just kind of pat it and work it. And you'll notice that you'll start to feel stickiness. So that's where you can, I like to put some little flour to the side here, a little pile. Yes, it's messy, but that's okay. And just kind of shake those sticky areas. That way our fingers don't stick when we're folding. So now we're gonna fold over here and fold there, pat it in, getting everything incorporated. Okay, take this one, fold it over, pat it out. Just repeat the side. Don't be afraid to use a little bit of flour every time you fold. That's totally okay, no worries. Fold. And this folding technique is creating those nice layers in your biscuit. Fold. Notice it's starting to come together. Form a nice dough. Fold. You can use your palm to kind of flatten it out. You don't really want to use your fingertips and press into it, because you're creating the layers, you're not trying to smush it down, but I'm just gently forming it out. Folds, I'm probably going to do just a couple more folds, and I will be satisfied with that. Fold, and we'll do one more fold. So at this point you can probably just pick it up, put a little bit more flour, and one more fold. Okay. So right now you can either go in with a rolling pin to flatten it out, but I like to press it out with my hands, just whatever you prefer. But to make sure you're using a rolling pin that is floured, so that way your dough doesn't start to stick. So I'm just flattening this out to about a 1/4 inch thick or so. Working all sides and pressing it out. It's always an exciting morning, or meal, I should say, whenever biscuits are being made, because they're just so good. Almost there. Okay. This looks great. This is a great dough. Okay. So you can start punching these out. If you want to make them thinner, you can. This is usually the thickness that I like. Okay, so we have our cup. I like to kind of just get as much flour around the rim as I can, so that way the cup doesn't stick to the dough when I'm punching it out. So you're gonna line up your cup on the dough and you're gonna go straight down. You don't wanna twist or anything like that. You just wanna push straight down and come straight up. And there's your biscuit. And you're gonna place this on a baking sheet. I've just lightly greased this baking sheet, and you're just gonna start piling them on there. I usually work really quickly doing this. My kids love to help with this part. They love to punch out. So I'm using up as much space as I can with the dough. You know, if it comes out with those uneven edges, it's totally fine. Don't let this dough go to waste. You can quickly reform it. Usually I let my kids kind of mold whatever they like, whatever shapes, and they make their own little biscuit. These will be a little bit thicker, but that's okay. I'll make one more. Actually, you know what? I just formed this one by hand and it makes a pretty big biscuit, and I usually give this one to my husband. Sometimes I like to shape it in a little heart or whatever, so you can be cute. Just gonna move these out the way, make some room, and we'll pop that one right there. So we've heated our oven to 450 degrees. I usually heat the oven up right before I get started, and that way the oven's ready to go. So we're gonna come in here, we're gonna pop these in here. We're gonna set the timer for about 12 minutes, but I'm gonna check them at 10. So, and as you can see, I have my bacon and my eggs already ready to go, because while that's cooking, I can just go ahead and get started with the whole meal. Ready?
All right, so this is Babe cooking. I'm commentating real quick. So where did we get the eggs? As you can tell, our eggs still have straw on them. We don't bother even washing them most of the time. Where do we get those eggs in?
We collect these eggs from our hens that we have. We have 8 hens, 1 rooster. We're soon to be adding more to our flock because we are hatching our own chickens, which I'm sure we'll make a video about that in the future. But yeah, we collect about 7 to 8 eggs every day, which is so nice because just like those biscuits, there's nothing that compares to fresh eggs.
Well, what's like the difference? Like, tell people like what's the difference between like getting a store-bought egg and then getting like eggs straight? Like, tell me about the process, right? Like, so how long does it take for somebody to start weaning people into the eggs?
Yes. So please, if you're interested on learning about chickens and keeping chickens, which we are no chicken expert.
We are the chicken expert. That's right.
We're aiming to be chicken experts, but we are actually sort of just learning how to homestead as time goes along, and it's been really fun. have our eggs. And our bacon. And there's a delicious breakfast with your homemade buttermilk biscuits. And you should know that I am not an expert baker. I've just been making biscuits for about, I don't know, a long time. So this is one thing that I've worked on and done over and over because I know that I love to eat them and my family loves to eat them, so I wanted to make sure that I can make these. But it's totally beginner friendly. You should definitely try it, and ladies, make these for your significant other, and I promise you they will love you forever. They're just so good. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and please subscribe, like this video, share it, and stay tuned because there will be a chicken video coming up.